Santos Febres is a Puerto Rican writer, poet, and literary critic who has significantly contributed to contemporary Afro-Latinx literature. Born in Carolina, Puerto Rico in 1966, she obtained her bachelor's degree in Hispanic studies from the University of Puerto Rico, Río Piedras. She's also a graduate of Cornell University, where she received her Ph.D. Santos Febres is widely recognized as one of the most important voices of contemporary Puerto Rican literature, particularly for exploring themes such as gender, race, and sexuality. She has published several books of poetry, essays, and fiction, including Sirena Selena, a finalist for the Rómulo Gallegos International Nobel Prize, and the book we are exploring in our Global Humanities Seminar. Her work has been translated and adapted into film. Santos Febres is also the founder of the Festival de la Palabra, a literary festival held in San Juan, Puerto Rico. In addition to her work as a writer, she is a professor at the University of Puerto Rico. She has received numerous awards and honors for her work, including a Guggenheim Fellowship and recent Writer in Residence at the Rockefeller Foundation's Bellagio Center Residency Program. And she's the recipient of the Juan Rulfo Prize for Short Story, Puerto Rico's National Literature Prize, and the Primavera Prize. And I'm just mentioning just a few prizes. She has a lot. With her extensive knowledge and contributions to Hispanic literature, Mayra Santos Febres promises to be a thought-provoking and engaging guest speaker for our class. Please join me in welcoming Professor Mayra Santos Febres.
Well, saludos a todas y a todos y a todes. Ashe. My name, as you well know, is Mayra Santos Febres. And I know that this is the first year writing seminar on identity, and specifically you have invited me to talk about Afro-Latinx identity. Well, I've always said that the best way to understand Afro-Latino or Latino-Latinx identity is to think of identity as a political development, not as a natural development, you know. It is not natural. I have a color in my skin, and I have a genre, and I have a history, and I was born in the island of Puerto Rico, ¿verdad? So right now I am interested in working and supporting and helping in any way I can to develop the category of Afro-Latinx identity. Why? Well, we can take several reasons into consideration. One of them is that the census of this year is trying to eliminate the category of identity, of ethnicity, and to say that Latinos are a race. This is a debate that is happening right now, you know, that we, because we speak Spanish, are a race. And that obviously has political, economical, and also creates problems with law. Because if we are a race, then Elvira is the same race that I am. And William Luis is the same race that I am. And I think we are all humans, so we are constituents of the human race, but that is not the implication that is being pursued in the census. The implication is that if you identify a significant number of citizens of the United States that identify themselves as Afro-Latino or Latino, then there is a certain kind of rights of law and civil rights that have to be acknowledged, measured, and also identify if there are epistemological, health, educational inequities, so that the general budget of the United States can determine what kind of aids, of reparation aids or programs have to be specifically developed for that population. That is what it is, you know? So identity politics has to be understood in terms of the politics that the rights and the programs, the civil rights politics that a particular group, political group, nation, or so, has to take into consideration in order to allocate funds. So of course that I am very concerned about the lack of funding that Latino students and specifically Afro-Latino identified students get in order to pursue career development, to pursue studies, research, to create the knowledge that will nurture those politics that are being implemented in a country. If you ask me, Mayra Santos Febres, how do I identify myself? I would say I identify myself fractally. That means that I don't only have one identity, but many identities that intersect and that play at a particular moment. And in here, I am not being particularly intelligent, you know. I think I know some things, but not all. I am quoting Chela Sandoval with a theoretical framework that she developed way in the 80s called oppositional consciousness and oppositional subject positioning, which means that if I am in a room of feminists, but they're all what I call feministas de perlas, which means white, privileged, Latin American, Argentinian, or Barcelonian feminists that live in Paris, and we are discussing the politics of feminism, I would say as a Black woman, this is the story. No? As an Afro-Caribbean woman, this is the story. You're not taking this into consideration because it is my duty as a person that has some access to the public speech, to dialogue, to enter in dialogue with people that might not intentionally or unintentionally take into consideration the way in which we live race and gender in a particular sector of the world. If, on the other hand, I am in a panel or in a public discussion with other Afro-Latinx people from the States, but I live in Puerto Rico, which is a colony of the United States, I would have to say, sister, you know, there is one other thing to add to this mix, and it's that I live in a colony that has a junta de control fiscal. I have no possibilities of voting in the continental US. There is a politics of reglementation. I speak Spanish. My work has to be translated if I find the way to translate it in order for other people to read it. So I'm not saying that I am worse off than you. I am saying that fractally, I mean, this condition that I assume as my identity has to be taken in consideration because of this particular situation. So what I'm trying to say is that identity is always fluctuating, always growing, always being in a position of tension, negotiation, and redefinition with the world. It is not something you're born with, it's something that is constructed and that has to be taken into consideration when you are talking about what is an Afro-Latinx identity. And for people like me that have so many identities, Puerto Rican, Afrodescendiente, I'm a person of African descent, living in Puerto Rico with a feminist consciousness that is in close, I'm very interested in the alliances between the islands and the diaspora in Latin America, and the diaspora because of the politics of immigration in the United States. That is, you know, that is very dangerous. We always have to be looking at that. Because of all these reasons, I am a fractal Caribbean, you know, and sometimes I ally with different groups that because we're fighting for the same goal, but always insisting on the particularities of people like me so that we can be taken into account. You know, half of my family lives in the United States, even though I live in Puerto Rico. So I am very, 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 very implicated in the lives of my cousins, my sobrinas, my primas, my sister. They are there. So I have to take and fight and defend those situations. That is one. And in all the things that I write, oh my God, I've already taken 20 minutes. In all the things that I write, another thing, and I am that kind of feminist that is very connected and very conscious of the oppression, the particular state violence and the oppression that our men, racialized men, have to face. I am not that kind of feminist that is talking about toxic masculinity as if it implicates all of the men. And I say this not because they're male here, although I'm good friends and comadres and compadres with William Luis, we've always worked together. But because I am a mother of a man, you know, of a Black man that lives in Puerto Rico, and I have seen in his face the terror when he thinks, oh my God, I have to go to study to the States, I am going to be the next man down. So I am very conscious of how masculinity, racialized masculinity, Afro-Latino masculinity is criminalized, and the way it is pursued, ¿verdad? Acoso, and the goal is to destroy that, to incarcerate and destroy our sons, brothers, mentors, compadres. I am not trying to cover with my hand the fact that there is violence and there is problems in our community, but at the same time that I acknowledge it, I raise always the banner of thinking about beyond, you know, these little encasillados and identities in which people put ourselves, because the point is to imagine a world that is more inclusive and just, and also that is post-racial. You know, what I want to live or work with is for the elimination of racialization in the world. And the problems that it causes. So, and if we can talk, and also, you know, that gender is not, again, another social prison that creates distance and inequities between populations. And when I'm talking about gender, I include gender dissidency. So if you're non-binary, or you are lesbian, or you're homosexual, whatever, trans, there should be spaces for you to explore and transform reality. So what I do in my work is that my work is and is not political. No, my work is political because it creates presence, but I don't like pamphlets. What I mean by pamphlets is that I don't purposely use art, performance, when I read out loud, or when I do videos, or when I write poetry or short stories or whatever. I don't use that exclusively to create consciousness in terms of our political situation, because I don't believe in that sectorism. Again, I am fractal, organic. Well, like nature, which is fractal. If you see nature, it works that way, you know? So basically what I am trying to say that I do want to decolonize the mind and the imagination when I write. So I want, my purpose while writing is to exploring the ways, the idioscapes. Here I am quoting Arjuna Padorai, that I understand as possibilities of imagination, feeling, and thought that comes from the experience of being a person of African descent in Latin America, the Caribbean, and its diasporas. You know, I want to explore that. I want to explore textures and colors and feelings. I want to talk about memory and ancestral memory. I want to explore Afropoetics. Why is it that when we do anything in terms of art, we're always talking about the spirit. We're always talking about the ancestors. We're always trying to recuperate memory and to place it and to honor it, you know, to place it in a place of a state of honoring. And why is it that our novels are not linear? Why they're elliptical? Why there's, for instance, in Sirena Selena or in other things that I write, I always put ibejis. No, I always follow the principle of duplicity of the twins. There is Sirena, but then there is a Sirenito, but then there is a Migueles. Why is it that that repetition happens with variations, you know? Why is it that the body and the different tonalities of skin, I take very, very specific moments to describe the difference, because I am not into placing everybody that is of African descent in the same category, because we are very different. You can meet in Afro-Latin America people that are blonde and blue eyes and they're of African descent, or people that are my color. I am very dark, that is of African descent, but have no consciousness. They have assimilated because they don't want any more violence directed towards them. So that is, I try to talk about all those different ways of assuming the identity. And there are two people, and then I would love to enter a dialogue, but there's two people, there's many people that that's another thing that I want to talk. There is a wonderful work developed by Jerome Blanche, and a wonderful work that I recently read, written by William Lewis. And I'm talking here about concepts. Jerome Blanche talks about the poetics of Malungaje. He says that our identity is supranational. It is supranational. Why? Because when they took us from the motherland, we had no saying in where were we going to be enslaved. I didn't pick to be born in Puerto Rico, or my ancestors to be brought over, or William Lewis, Cuba, or Jerome Branch, Guyana, or Georgina Herrera, one of my musas in Cuba, or Angela Maria Dávila in Puerto Rico, or, you know, so when I read, I read all this literature to claim it as mine. People say, and I'm always fighting against that, well, the tradition of Afro-Colombian literature is very young. And I said, no, it's not. It started in the 19th century or before with Juan Manzano, in Cuba, and with you know, so many other people in Virginia Brindis de Salas in Uruguay, and other 15 Duncan in Ecuador, and people, Dalma Llanos is also there from the US. You know, we're everywhere. Pura Belpre, we're everywhere. And I always think that it is a supranational identity. The identity of Afro-Latino is not an ethnic, it's supranational, you know, and also with variants, fractal again, because the Afro-Colombian experience is not the same as the Afro-Uruguayan experience from the 40s, it's not the same as Nicolás Guillen's experience in the 30s and 40s in the Dominican Republic, I mean in Cuba, or Luis Pales Matos in Puerto Rico, or Julia de Burgos in Puerto Rico. So it's very, very, very varied and rich. And then William Rees also says that we have to understand also the category of proto-authorship, which is really important for me to think about the tradition of Afro-Latin American and Latinx writing. Because the first texts that were published were written by slaves or by enslaved people or libertos, you know, and sometimes these declarations were used for other purposes and are intervened. And I think that that continues to happen to a certain extent because there is a lot of censorship in editorial houses, in educational anthologies, to put us, and to make us say, this is an Afro-Latinx identity fixed. This is what it should be said, and this is what it shouldn't say, and it has to fit in here. So the directness of the manipulation of our words is something we have also to be very, very cautious about. It happens to women, it happens to people from the LGBT community, it happens to, you know, all these readers that all of a sudden publish these papers that they said, I want you to write about this. And you know that, you know, I've received those invitations, and sometimes I say, well, if I can write about what I want to say, I won't be published, I guess, in your collection from Routledge or from Harvard or from, you know, that it looks like they're trying to bring us in, but really what is happening is to control what should be understood. So I want to use and also thank William for this concept of the proto-authorship. That was the concept, no? Because I think it's it reveals a lot, you know, and it again places the voice of the author in a political situation, in a complex, you know, web of relations with publication, reception, definition, how this should be taught, how we should understand. And that's what I think I'm sorry if it is too complex and I didn't say what, you know, I didn't say a particular definition, but you know, para redondear, to conclude, I think that Afro-Latinx identity, as many identities that are of people from African descent in the diasporas and in Latin America and the Caribbean, is supranational, is fractal. It intersects as ethnicity with racialization, you know, and ethnicity, you cannot say, well, all Hispanics or all Latinos speak Spanish and therefore they're a race, like the Jews, something like that. You know, races don't exist. They are a political construct. And we racialized people have to be very aware of that, because sometimes because of the color, because this becomes a marker, we forget that it is a manipulation of just human variation, you know? It's a political manipulation of that. So it is supranational, it is diasporic, And it is always, always in tension with what is it that it means. You know, and we have to always be contesting it. Well, this is Afro-Latinx. Are you Afro-Latinx? And I say, well, yes, but I'm also this, that, this, that, this. I'm a human and I'm as complex as anything, and you will not put me in a little cage so that you can fit your quota. I am more, you know? And yes, you have to give me back all the money that was stole from our communities in terms of health services, educational services. You have to repair. I mean, I don't want 40 acres and a mule. I wouldn't know what to do with the mule. I have nowhere to park it. Well, mules don't get parked, but I don't live, you know, anyway, I live near the beach. I don't need a mule. What I need is scholarships, library repositories for research, fellowships for my students, publication programs for kids, so that the writers can write the things that need to be taught in schools. These discussions and texts, free, no proto-author, nor censored, free texts that reveal the diversity. Because I think this, but another Afro-Latino might be thinking something very different, because their experiences, our experiences, are different as human beings and people that have been racialized. So that's all I have to say about Afro-Latino identity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm sure our students and participants, they should have many questions. So I'm going to open our discussion, and let me, please feel free to select any person that is making a question, Mayra, as you wish. So let me see.
Let me put it in gallery so I can see you all. I don't see any hands up. Oh, no. Adios, Benigno Trigo is there. Hi, Benigno. So wonderful to see you. Digo, not see
Hola.
you. Hey,
Hola, Mayra.
abrazo. I like that guy. Like him a lot. He thinks very hard.
Fans,
like
we are fans. Benigno, Willie. We also have Karen here from the graduate program. We have Amarilis from the department, and we have our students. So let's open our discussion. Annabella?
What was your inspiration for writing Sirena Selena? Like, where did the story come from?
That's a good question. I once had a boyfriend. His name is Moises Agosto Rosario. He's also a writer, but he became more of an activist than anything else. And then we broke up because he came out of the closet. He said that he was a gay man, that he loved me very much, but not exactly as a girlfriend. And I did love him very much too. So first I was very confused, and then I decided that that I would let this love to unfold, and we became family. Actually, he is the godfather of my 2 kids right now. And I entered into the world of activism against AIDS through him, because he has become a very important researcher and gay activist, again, for health services. And one day we went to El Danubio Azul. El Danubio Azul existed. The bar where it was a drag bar. And I started talking to people there. The first thing that when I sat at the bar, somebody came and said, "Are you a biological girl or are you a made-up girl?" And I said, "What is that question?" I said, "Well, I guess I am biological, but I'm not completely sure." And then I started ranting this I don't like definitions very much. I like to play with them. And I said, but I really feel like I am a transvestite trapped in the body of a Black woman. That's what I said. And everybody started laughing and saying, mira la nena esta, que atrevida. And all of a sudden I became friends. And I always ask people, and in the Caribbean that is very, very, very common. I ask people very intimate questions right off the bat. Like, who's your grandma and where do you come from? Why do you dress in yellow? I am like a little 5-year-old kid and I am 57, always asking those questions to anybody I meet. So I started asking those questions to the girls that were there and the women that were there. And they started telling me these incredible stories. Half of them might not be true, but I didn't care. They were so beautifully put. And I just started writing this short story that would not end. And when I reached page 68, I said, oh my God, I'm writing a novel. I don't know how to write novels. So I started studying and understanding that the way in which the modern novel from the 19th century works, it really didn't fit. So that's why the novel is written as if you were in a drag queen show. There are monologues, and then there is a story, and then you have the indirect narrator that sometimes is Marta Divine, and sometimes is Sirenita, and sometimes is Migueles, and sometimes is, you have this Virginia Woolf kind of thing in the middle in which you go inside of the eyes of the people that are there. And that's how I worked it out. It had to be very oral and it had to be segmented so that I can get the different points of view in the form. So, because I got just completely seduced by the way in which these women would tell me their stories. How did they chose and became women? And also the spirituality and the play of, and I asked them, so how do you make up your face? And they said, oh, I'll teach you. And then they took me to the los camerinos, to the backstage, so that I could watch how would they erase their face and put it back up. We had no channels then, so I couldn't see it in Google or in TikTok or anywhere. I had to be there, and it was wonderful. So that's how I did that story. It was because of activism, and then I became I saw the beauty. And, I'm a writer. Beauty always comes first.
Murad has a question. Murad?
Yes.
In the book, you explore a lot of characters that have some trauma. Is there in any ways or aspects that you can relate to that trauma?
Well, I don't think that you can live trauma-free. There is a trauma, there is a trauma. There is a violence that you have received that you don't know why. There is a death and a loss. I don't think that, sometimes I think that trauma medicalizes a lot of the experiences of life. And life is not supposed to be perfect, nor supposed to be easy. But that's me. I believe that difficulties lead to consciousness and to transformation. But then again, I'm a santera, and that's what we believe in. There's no way of you transcending yourself and your understanding of life if there is not some kind of psychic death, in which you die and leave who you were behind and come back with a greater clarity. But one thing that is good about all of us having some kind of trauma is that sometimes, if we are lucky, we develop empathy. we can, because we have suffered, we can recognize the suffering of another person, even if it is not the same suffering, if we are lucky. Because we have all met people who have been traumatized and then they become monsters. They get themselves permission to do bad, to hurt others because they have been hurt. So that happens too. And my trauma as a Black woman in the Caribbean that has been marginalized and that comes from a poor family helped me understand very easily what was happening with the young transvestites and drag teens that I met. I could understand. And I didn't have to judge because I wasn't interested in judging. I was interested in understanding. And also in understand the feeling of empathy that I immediately felt. You know, when you meet people and sometimes you feel that you have to hug them, even if you don't know them very well, well, that's how I felt. And I wanted to understand. So yes, sensibility takes an effort and pain. And I'm very glad for my traumas because I could understand the others. It's not about me. I'm not very interested on me. I already know my story.
We have a question from Sid. Sid, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation, Mayra. I had a question about something you said at the beginning of the presentation. You said that identity is a product of political development. So I was wondering, what do you think political leaders of today can do to help people express their identity the way they want to?
Well, I live in Puerto Rico. I think that what they should do is just step aside, please. Because they're so stupid. At least my leaders, the leaders of my country, are so stupid that sometimes, you know, I just go, oh my God, would they shut up? I do believe, though, that there is people that are really working on identity that should take those places. And in Puerto Rico, at least, and also Alejandro Casio has given me, you know, so many people that are doing this. I really think that community leaders and people that are working from the base, people that have been activists for a long, long time should really be sitting in the places that are developing politics and laws to protect the pursuit of happiness and freedom, which is what, and equality, which is something that we really, really need. For instance, sometimes when I listen, and this is a self-criticism, sometimes when I listen to feminists and feminist fight, for instance, in Puerto Rico to protect the right to abortion, I sit down with policymakers. This is something I do. Mostly because yo soy bien presentada, and I have given classes to almost everybody in this island. So I have their emails and their phone numbers. So I just take my phone and I call Senator Ana Irma Rivera Lacen or the people from Taller Salud. And I said, listen, remember that during the 30s, the 40s, starting in 1931, and that happened also in the United States, women of color, what people call women of color, will go to hospitals and come out sterilized. That happened. You know, they would go for anything, for having a kid, and they would come out with no fallopian tubes. So when we're talking about the rights to decide over your body, you have to remember that that means not only the right to abortion, but the right to determine when and if you are going to bring life into this world. You know, there's some of us that are mothers and we are political mothers. We know what we're doing. It is not that we are giving our
body to the patriarch so that there will happen in our bodies. No, I decided to have my 2 kids because I remembered all of the women that were sterilized, forcefully sterilized in Puerto Rico. So the right to my body is the right to my body. To the white women, they wouldn't let them have abortions. To the Black women, they wouldn't let them have kids. You know, that is the length of racialization. So this is what I'm talking about, you know, that I think politicians should listen to the women that have been fighting, or the people, grassroots organizations that have been fighting. This happened again. I can give you 10,000 examples. For instance, during Huracán Maria, we were helping each other. We were working with CONCRA. And CONCRA said to us, look, there's a really important crisis going on that nobody's taking into consideration, which is that hormones are not getting to Puerto Rico around, and our trans people are having health problems. And they're committing suicide, and they're going, you know, crazy because they don't have the, you know, the artículos de primera necesidad, you know, first response aid and articles did not include hormones. So we had to raise the voice and go to FEMA and to the emergency thing and say, look, you have to put this in the list. But a politician will know about that. So I think that we, the people, have to always be working alliances and strategies of mutual support in order to get these things clear and the discussion clear, and create a broad network of support and push politicians, or what I propose, which is that community leaders should be sitting in municipal asambleas, you know, in the municipal government. I don't know if that is the correct translation, but you know, you have the mayor, and then you have asambleas municipales, and then you have the senators, etc., so that we are there and can take decisions quicker. In Puerto Rico, I support the senators that are independent. We have 3, and I go to their offices every week. You know, Rafael Bernabe, Ana Irma Rivera Lacen, and Chaco Vargas. They are not part of political parties, and I work with them. I also go to the Department of Education every 2 or 3 months and start bringing havoc. It's really fun when you see people, you know, that they're scared of you. Another question? Ooh, it's almost 2. Annabella.
Your mic, Annabella.
Do you feel the translation of your works from Spanish to English do the story you tell justice, or are there things that are like kind of censored because you're not able to express it in Spanish the same way you are English?
Well, I always work very closely with translators. As you have seen, I'm very presenta, and I know enough English to understand the musicality and the feeling that I wanted the text to convey. It is very difficult with my translations to Italian, especially Italian. Portuguese, I can get it. I know Portuguese, I know French, I can deal with it. But sometimes, you know, Croatian, I don't know Croatian, or I got several books translated into Icelandic. I don't know why. And I can, or Korean, and I don't get it, you know, I have to trust. But I am so grateful that there are people that are reading me, because I am not a commercial writer. I am not a commercial writer. I am una escritora incómoda, and I like being that. I like being incómoda. I like being, you know, difficult. Not in terms of me being a diva, but where do we place this woman? And what is it that she says? And I want that sense of beauty and connection to come through the language. So I only work with translators in English that let me pick up the phone and say, mira, esta no es la, no, you have to change this word because even though it is the correct word, it doesn't sound right. So, and if I don't like it, I just say, I don't like it. And I don't let them publish it. And again, you know, I don't live from literature. I teach and I work too much, but it's good because I have financial independence from editorial houses. And that gives me a freedom that if I would be, you know, a commercial writer, I wouldn't have. So I pay the price.
Mayra, now that you mentioned musicality of the language, especially in the novel we are analyzing in our seminar, you have, for example, the first chapter, so small. You mentioned Lucy Fabery, you mentioned La Lupe, and we can see the bolero as a theme in the whole novel. Can you expand a little bit more about the use of music, how music is part of your identity, please?
Well, since racialized people do not have that easy access to the printed word, you know, what we had for a long time was music. So, and also it creates a structure. Music creates structure. If you, for instance, take a salsa song, you have an invocation, you know, and then you tell a story, and then you have a chorus, and then you finish, you know. And if you see the novel works like that. You have an invocation, then you tell a story, then you have a chorus, somebody that says their story, that creates a contrapunto, and then you finish almost, you know, with a story. If you take Pedro Navaja, you can see it. If you see Concepción, eleva la vista al cielo, va buscando, va gritando, hay hijos que mantener, you know. If you see, these are our texts. In Santería, in Regla de Osha, you also have that. You have an invocation, which is a moyuba and a salutation. And then you have, you know, then you have a middle, a story, and then you interpret that story. So I always think that we have our way of structuring the word. And I try to write my structurally, I'm talking structurally. I always try to find these ways, these texts, because they are texts that organize a cosmology, a conception of the world. And in Sirena Selena Vestida de Pena, I don't know if it is evident, but I did it with all intention. I did it on purpose. I organized the novel as a bolero. I did it. I sat down, I listened to Lucy Fabery, I listened to La Lupe, I listened to all these divas de la canción, and I looked and I went to the internet and I brought out and I said, oh, this is the structure, so I will do it this way. And the musicality is central because I wanted the power of the spoken word. The power of the spoken word, the way we conceive it, to be at the center of the novel. For us, speech, the word is not a concept. It is an energy. You know, it's like when you say, damn, you're not saying damn. You're not saying te maldigo. You're not saying that, you know. You're saying something more than that. You're saying you're putting a whole energy into it. And in Spanish is wonderful. You know, for instance, when you say carajo, carajo, it's an island. Vete al carajo, that was a faraway island. That is what carajo means, one of the things, you know. Pendejo, pendejo is a pubic hair. When you curse in Spanish and you say pendejo, what you're saying, you are a pubic hair. That's what you are. But that's not what we're saying, you know. So the consciousness of the force of intonation and musicality, I took it very, 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 very intentionally when I was writing Sirena Selena Vestida de Pena. And also because I know of a lot of drag queens from the 80s and 90s that wanted to be those women. They did not want to be a woman. They wanted to be a diva, which is something completely different, you know. Right now, I am not dressed, I'm not made up. And we women, we know when we want to make ourselves up and use maquillaje, you turn into another person. When I put on high heels, I am not Mayra Santos. First, because I don't know how to walk with them, but I know I look good. So that's what I'm going after, you know? So it's an impersonation of identity and a representation of identity that I also wanted to talk about. And what did that mean? And how did it sound? Like.
Wonderful. More questions. I know we have time for 1-2 more questions, Mayra.
Okay.
Just one. I know because all my students shared the question previously with me, so I know
Okay.
a lot of questions. So please feel free to ask your question.
One question.
One question. The last one is the lucky one.
A la una, a las dos. Yes, Chloe.
I was wondering, since you give so much like life and like make the story so unique for each character, which one was the hardest to write about?
Well, the easiest one to write about was Sirena. That was the easiest. Because I knew Sirena, you know, Sirena is kind of like me, is a version of me, is this little girl, boy who was brought up by her grandma, and she wanted life. She wanted to get out of the little tiny space where she lived, and she wanted to see the world. And I am that person. So I constructed Sirena in that way, a person that wanted more. She is that. But the most difficult one to write was Hugo Graubel. The business person, the businessman that was in love with Sirena, because I could have made a villain out of him. It was too easy to make a villain out of him. I wanted for him to have a trauma, like Murad said. You know, he also had a trauma. He was, you know, that when you love somebody, sometimes you have like a specular relationship with the other person. Something that the other person has lived reminds you of something that you haven't acknowledged about yourself. So este nene, Hugo Graubel, was a Sirena, but his father and his privilege made him become this guy that he was as transvestite as Sirena. He was a show. He was a made-up person. And that is what I wanted to convey when I was trying to find Hugo Graubel. And that's why I had to do all that arc, like my kid tells me that it says right now, all this backstory about Hugo when he was little, when his father took him to this prostitute so that he can become a man, and all these things that all of a sudden, if you look closely, he is reliving this trauma with Sirena. He's trying to be a man, but his definition of a man. He's doing He has too much privilege to lose. So he cannot do it. But that's what he was trying to do, to sanar, to heal that moment in which he became disconnected from himself.